Rurouni Kenshin is one of my favorite series of all time. It's the reason I started this channel. Now, I haven't really spoken about Kenshin all too often here, and I'm hoping to change that this year. As the title suggests, today I'll be giving my thoughts on the 2020 remake of the Rurouni Kenshin anime. Season 1 has wrapped up its serialization, and I've already made a prior video about this anime before it aired, so I'll touch back on that and some of the points and complaints and suggestions that I had and see if any of those have been addressed. So let's start with the good of this adaptation. Overall, Rurouni Kenshin 2023 does a lot of good things with the Kenshin IP. In some instances, it outshines the original, like with some of its fights, which are most of the time on par if not better than the original purely from an animation perspective, which, hard to believe, isn't always the case with modern productions. For example, its rendition of Kenshin vs. Jinne blows the original out of the water. Gone are the still frames and sluggish animation of the 1996 adaptation in favor for a faster, more fluid take that really showcases the power of Kenshin and the veracity of Jinne. I'd argue being even better than the Reflections OVA version of this fight that had been my favorite for a long time. But animation isn't enough to please or make a good adaptation. After all, Reflections and Shin Kyoto-hen have amazing animation most of the time, but both fall short of being good adaptations of the arcs that they are trying to adapt, and with Reflections of the original story it's trying to tell. Another thing that the series does, and the main reason the remake exists, is the accuracy of its storytelling. Even Kenshin's scarf that he wears in the first few chapters of Volume 1 is part of his attire during these segments. It's something small, but the attention to detail is appreciated and doesn't go unnoticed. Gone are the filler of the original 1996 anime for a more streamlined, accurate telling of the Kyoto arc. And not only so, it often builds on the original manga with changes that are a more accurate reflection of the time, like changing the placement where Sunan Tsukioka hides his bombs, under his floors instead of in a closet, to reflect the fact that during this era, closets were only commonplace in wealthy households. Or the Raijuta arc that builds on Raijuta as a character by adding an anime original epilogue showing how much of a fraud Raijuta really is, not being able to take life, to dirty his sword, to dirty his soul, as opposed to Kenshin, who already has a bloody past as Hitokiri Batosai. In contrast, this arc is severely glossed over in the original anime to the point where it feels almost like filler. It's a poorly placed drag to sit through on subsequent rewatches, and it just mishandles Raijuta's character and leaves him very flat and one-dimensional. Another great thing about this adaptation is its pacing. It's able to tell the Tokyo arc and then some within 24 episodes that don't feel rushed or too slow to get through, something that I was initially worried about when its adaptation was announced because of FMAB and Shaman King 2022 handled their adaptations, rushing the first arc to get to the new material due to having a pre-existing anime adaptation. The character designs are also standout. The thick outlines really make the characters pop and give them a somewhat painted feeling, almost brushstroke like when the animation's at its best. It's very stylized, oftentimes reminding me of what Studio Wit did with Attack on Titan. It also feels like Watsuki's current style, as the characters are very sharp and angular, and I assume this is the case because I see Hokkaido getting adapted with this anime after the Jinshu arc. Another fantastic addition to this adaptation is the inclusion of Chapter 0, an arc that was created during 2012 for the Rurouni Kenshin reboot manga miniseries, Rurouni Kenshin Restorations, which was a retelling of the first half of the Tokyo arc to correspond with the then first live-action film at the time. At the end of Volume 2, there is new canon material featuring a new character and a small storyline that acted as a prologue to the main series. One of the main characters of this prologue would be referenced again during the Rurouni Kenshin Hokkaido arc. During my first video speaking about my skepticism of this reboot, I said this:
"There's a few ways this anime can distinguish itself while keeping the pacing intact and giving old viewers something new to look at. As of recording this, there has been so much new material added to earlier Kenshin arcs. A new starting point, for example, with Chapter 0. This, I believe, could be the perfect first episode."
Which gives me confidence that True Flame, among others, will get adapted in this anime, making for the ultimate anime adaptation of the Rurouni Kenshin manga. And this is where the good of this adaptation ends. So now, let's talk about the bad. But before that, if you're new here, subscribe. I'd like to get to 20k and we're almost there. And if you like this kind of content, I frequently do these types of videos, not only on anime and manga, but video games and pop culture as well. And if that's your thing, stick around. I have a Patreon if you want to take that support a step further. And if that's not your thing, check out the channel's continuous sponsor, Boomslang. Why Boomslang? Well, click the link in the description to find out more. And with that, let's get back to today's video. Rurouni Kenshin 2023 has a lot of good, a lot to like, sometimes a lot to love, but there's also bad, and we'll start with the cinematography. Where 1996 shines, 2023 falls short, bringing lackluster cinematography, shot composition, and sometimes color palettes, leaving some scenes feeling boring, uninspired, and cheap. Rurouni Kenshin has large portions where characters just stand around and talk to each other, and that's not a problem, but the way it's presented is. And even if we disregard what came before, being its original anime, when we look at some of its contemporaries from the same magazine like Jujutsu Kaisen, Bleach, Undead Unluck, or even Spy Family for being technical, Rurouni Kenshin doesn't stand up to its brothers and sisters. It almost feels like Leading Films is afraid to play with the medium of animation sometimes. Another sour spot of this adaptation is its score. Rurouni Kenshin 2023 feels hollow and generic, oftentimes failing to leave a memorable mark. While there's a few standout songs that really complement this adaptation, most of it is bland and forgettable, which is a shame because the songs that do grab your attention paint a picture of what the series can be if they leaned more into those tracks, as compared to Bleach or Jujutsu Kaisen, with scores that feel unique and every song catches your attention, it demands your attention. I just felt that better could be done, and hopefully better is done when season 2 arrives. Even the animation at points is subpar. It was oftentimes painful to watch Bleach or Jujutsu Kaisen first and then Kenshin week to week. The former adaptations are so good, making an average adaptation like Kenshin feel like a downright bad one in comparison. Out of all Leading Films adaptations this season, being Atelier Ryza and Tokyo Revengers Season 3, Kenshin shines the brightest and is the most consistent, and I hope that that consistency carries over to the Kyoto arc and is expanded upon. Hopefully we see less inconsistencies and more of the positives. That's not to say that the animation was always great. In the original, a lot of times it was stiff and downright bad with wonky off-model characters, but it made up for that with its cinematography and music. I don't want to compare too much, but Kenshin leaving Kyoto feels so much more impactful as an episode during the 1996 run than the 2023 run. The cinematography, color, music, the tone. This episode feels somber overall, and even Kenshin and Karu's final moment together is fantastic, versus the manga's simplicity that the 2020 version adapts panel for panel. One final plight is the inclusion of Chapter 0. While it was something that I wanted, the way it's adapted feels somewhat tacked on and out of place. The placement is slot before Saito's introduction, being a story that Kenshin tells remaining Kenshin Gumi, as opposed to acting as the first 2 episodes, which is a shame. And the animation is very lackluster. It's just not a good presentation for this new Kenshin material. All in all, Rurouni Kenshin 2023 is a fine adaptation. It isn't perfect, but it does a lot of things right, and I recommend it to all Kenshin fans and new ones because of all its good and the promise of an anime that will tell the manga story in its entirety. This is Grimtoki, this has been Beyond Animation, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.